Guys, Luigi here. In this video, we're going to talk about buttons and their importance in the design system and in any design project, really, since these are one of the most essential components that you're going to use in pretty much any design project you're going to work on. Now, we're going to explore these buttons by Bonnie Hong, which was kind enough to give this file as a Figma community file. And buttons, we're going to start with the basics. So, of course, everybody knows what is a button, but one of the important things to keep in mind as a designer is how you're going to strategically divide and structure them within a design system and what is going to be the rationale behind it. Because as a start, we're going to have in the very most projects primary and secondary buttons, but things can get more complicated when we start introducing more and more buttons. So starting from the basics, primary buttons are going to be the very most common and primary, as the name suggests, buttons in your actual file, and then we're going to have secondary buttons. So usually an example of a primary button could be something around these lines where we're actually having a full in this case it's a blue color, since that might be the main color of the brand, and then a secondary button might be something like this one right here, which is an outline. And the reason why this works efficiently is because it's very clear for the user which one is the button with the most visual emphasis, hence which one is the most important. So it all comes down to basic UX as to which one you're going to utilize. And then we're going to have scenarios where we're going to have further buttons and so on and so forth. Now, useful buttons are also the link buttons, because these are essentially going to make it clear that these are just this is a link, but these are buttons which are usually used when you don't want to attribute much visual emphasis. So it's almost like going back to the original to the origins of the web, where we just have links and on top of that, other button types that you can consider having is icon buttons. And these are useful in certain specific situations where you want to add a visual cue to the button itself in order to make it just more clear right away. Now, I am a fan of the icon button with this structure. So basically having the icon either on the left or on the right hand side, it's really going to depend on the type of button. Usually on the left is the most common pattern, and then you're going to have the text on the right hand side. This works efficiently compared to say something around these lines where we're just having the icons, because it's extremely clear for the user what this button is about. And this is actually something which I want to highlight, because I notice some designers sometimes they take for granted what is the meaning and the purpose of a specific call to action. So they tend to abuse these icon only buttons, which it's something that can work pretty well in some contexts, especially when it's very clear, and especially when the audience is um, you know, tech savvy in that sense. But if you're working, for example, on a web app where the main audience is, say, people in their 50s or 60s, and you have a complex flow, these type of buttons just make it very clear what the purpose is. So overall, you always want to keep those elements in mind. And on top of that, another very important topic, as you have seen so far, is that these buttons in this set have different sizes. Now, the sizes are going to essentially depend on a few factors. The first one being if it's the website or the web app that these buttons are going to be integrated. Usually on the websites, you're going to have you're going to utilize some specific button sizes, which is going to entirely depend on the website really, compared to the web app where maybe we have some more minute buttons, but again, it's going to depend on that, and mainly it's the main reason why you want to use one size or the other is depending on the responsiveness and which device you're designing for. So of course, for smaller devices, smaller buttons can be quite useful, or for web apps, and of course for larger screen sizes, you're going to also consider the larger buttons. So usually at least at the bare minimum, I want to have two sizes of buttons, either a medium or a large. But the more you're going to work on a project, the more I need is going to arise, especially if you're working on a complex web app where you're going to most likely need more sizes for the button. So it's just a good practice to lay out the foundation from the start and especially organize and name the layers of the buttons in a way which makes sense from a design system standpoint. So as you can see, even here, all of the layer naming is very organized, and it's for a really good reason, because it's going to be much easier to organize these into components and variables and all the goodies that we talk about regularly on the channel. On top of that, we have to talk about the states. So the default state, of course, is the one that we have all the time. And then we're going to need to take in account the hover state, which is essentially once a user hover over the button but hasn't clicked yet. So this is the hover state. The focus state is when you are clicking on the button. So you're clicking with the left mouse button, but you haven't released it yet. So that, of course, is going to bring you to the other page. So it's going to create a redirect. And that is something that, again, you need to take in account. A lot of designers just focus on the hover state, but the focus state is such a nice touch, and it's also great for an accessibility standpoint. So it's definitely one that you want to have in your design system. And of course, also the disabled button, which is going to be the state whenever a button is not accessible. So for example, if you could have added free entries within a UX flow, and you reached that maximum of free entries, maybe you want to consider to still show the button, but in a disabled state, so that it's essentially telling the user, hey, you cannot add more elements to this flow. So in that case, it's going to be really useful. On top of that, another thing that you want to consider is the regarding the states, but not in terms of the interactions side of things, is you want to consider also the states where you have success or error messages or warnings or any of the states that might appear from a UX standpoint in your UX flows. So you might consider having buttons that turn into green or red or orange. So that again is really going to depend on how the project is going to be structured. But nonetheless, you have to focus on the grand picture, and whenever you're dealing with structuring buttons in the design system, it's going to be exactly the same as with any other element. So you always have to play a chess game and really try to think ahead what are going to be the requirements in the design project that I'm working with in the short term and in the long term, and how can I create a bulletproof solution that is going to be easy to expand as time goes on. And my recommendation for this is not to start from scratch, but always take inspiration from people who already been there and done that. And that means having a look at the top design systems out there, how they're organizing buttons at scale, so that you can already have an idea how to do the same in a way which is going to be scalable for you and your clients in the future. So I hope that this video was helpful. If you want to learn more about UI UX design, on my channel I have over 900 videos entirely for free. And I've been a designer for over a decade now. So feel free to check them out, and I'll see you in the next one.